Welcome everyone, Dr. Thor here. Get ready for Gnosis. Well, this is Gnosis 4, and it may seem, excuse me, a little repetitive, but it isn't, because this is the core of Gnosis. Now, how do you learn Gnosis? You know, I get this all the time, and people want, well, you meditate on a star for 10 minutes and you chant, Goopa Kappa Ka. Well, I'm afraid Gnosis doesn't work like that. These outside little tricks that people like to play to think they're getting into some conscious state. Oh, takey some ayahuasca. Oh, yeah, that'll get you in the sewer. You can be just as smart as Terrence McKenna. There ain't no aliens. Drunken guys make crop circles. I mean, you know, the kind of stuff, if you're a really serious Gnosis practitioner, as I am, you know, Gnosis is fascinating. It's also very disillusioning, but that's part of the process. You want to know truth? You want to know Gnosis? Well, you have to do what I'm telling you to do, or listen to how Gnosis works. It is not about using any tool or anything else. You have to change the way you think. And this also will affect how you use the technologies that we offer at Radionic Tech. How do we use the technologies? Well, you can't use it with the same head that you go into your church to, your schools, or everything else. Now, you got to learn to play the game, but you have to think differently or the technology doesn't work for you. I hope people understand that. And starting to think differently, because a lot of it always, that's your opinion, Dr. Thor. Well, it isn't, because I give you examples when I talk about people that are getting it all wrong. They're indirectly, if not directly, lying to you for their own personal benefit. They're just bad at what they do, and this is not unusual. And there's a lot of reasons for it, because it's not being bad at what you do, it's they're deliberately hyping themselves to get ratings, to make more money, etc. It goes with any system you're in, whether it's capitalistic or there really isn't any communistic systems out there. Communism, as we know it, is just a form of Nazism. It's no different. It's a dictatorship. It's just a dictatorship that pats you on the back saying you're part of a comrade. Comrade what? Well, and then you go back and drink French champagne while the other person gets nothing. So understanding this is the key to Gnosis, and that's why I keep going over it. And hopefully this will be the last one. I expect to move into more... Hopefully this is the last time. I hope to move into more interesting areas past this, but this is what you have to watch for. This is how you can find out the fraud that society is, and how you have to think different, and how you have to have a different way of functioning so that you can understand what's going on. Because I have yet to find a credible person in almost anything. They all have access to grind. They're all involved in some weird stuff. It's really shocking. And you just can't really find anybody, because everybody's living in the same consciousness. They think they're crusaders going to find information, but you're working out of what you've been told by your controllers of how to look at things. You listen to people who are lying to you, who have their own objectives in mind, their own axe to grind, and it goes on and on. And this has been blaringly, I mean, there's so much to easily find in the research with these new real crime things that seem to fascinate particularly middle-aged women with lots of money, seem to love this real crime stuff. And there's stories that, you know, are 30, 40, 50 years ago. So the information you gain is just about worthless. You know, somebody goes out and does research and they're getting all the old stuff and then coming to their own conclusions based on what? Nothing. It's all hearsay. I did that. Well, you know, if you want to sell something or somebody to pay attention to you, well, you're going to have to come out with something outrageous. And that's exactly what they do. And the bottom line is, with most things, it comes down that people are doing this for their own personal benefit. They're not researchers for researchers' sake. They're researchers who are trying to make money, trying to make a living, and you can see that with most of them, because you'll find that they keep begging for money on top of it. People who claim to have jobs who know all this stuff, well, they're begging for money all the time. Now, you should be monetizing what you're doing. You're giving out good information. Well, there should be a group of people that support you and pay you monthly through Patreon, etc. I certainly do that, and there's nothing wrong with it. One way we can get honest people is the fact that they have a monthly income, that they don't have to go out and talk on stupid things on YouTube and other places. You know, if they have the money, they're going to be honest. They found this out, of course, in any corrupt area. They found this out, of course, in Afghanistan. Well, all the police were corrupt. Why were they corrupt? Well, because they couldn't live. The minute they paid the police more money, corruption went down by 50 and 60%. That's how it works. So if we have a group of funded people who are balanced, the other thing is the ego problem. I know more than you do. I'm a street guy. Yeah, I come from the street. Yeah, I know what's going on. So this is all the kind of stuff that you're going to get out there. So there is a problem with the ego that comes after the support, but you got to start somewhere. One of the problems you have with everything is everybody owes their soul to the general store, as that old song went. So probably nobody knows that song, but what is it, 50 tons? But the whole idea is that you have to create the atmosphere to give these people a chance to prove whether they're good people or not. Now, I understand that there basically are no good people. They don't do anything except based out of their own profit, their own deviant factors, and it's gotten so bad that I'm not sure there's ever any good people. I'm not sure there ever was, though. This is something, it's only now because it's expensive. Well, talk to General Custer, the famous Custer dude. Well, he wrote about all the corruption in the Grant administration, the 1920s, and they made 3 or 4 movies of how corrupt Los Angeles was. It goes on, and I'm sure we can go back. Some of the most corrupt places, ironically, are places like China. The Soviet Union. Well, there's no money there. They're communists. They work together. Yeah, they work together at the top to make more money. So the whole idea is that you can't find anybody who is not corrupt. So we go on and on and on. We have people who like to claim they're so pure and wonderful, like the Mormons, and they're so separate. Well, they are so corrupt it isn't funny, and they're hired for a lot of federal law enforcement positions, which are super corrupt. What are they doing in there when they find all that out? I don't know, maybe they go back home with their sigil underwear and project out to the stars, which is what the Mormons believe in. So all of this is kind of amusing, but it gets down to the point of this is a blatant proof of Gnosis. If you can identify the lies and the deceits, because you've done your research, and I spent hours and hours in research, I get a lot of books. I read constantly. I'm not looking at the Beverly Hillbillies, Gilligan's Island, and other things I don't spend my time on. So the whole idea is you have to get out there and put your time into where you can to get all this information, and then you have to filter it properly, meaning you have to understand that you're looking at this from a Gnosis viewpoint. So I've already given people backgrounds of how to do this in terms of the minute you hear something, you do the opposite. So remember, reverse thinking is very important because that cancels out the shocking impact that news came to you. OJ killed somebody. No, OJ didn't kill somebody. And I'm going to fight for that opinion. That's how you have to be. So you got to get to, because you're not going to get to truth buying into what you're told by the media and all the corrupt scumbuckets who are giving you that information, mostly for personal profit. I've talked about this before, and you can watch different events. Anytime there's a major event, watch what's going on. Point is, 9/11 with the trade centers, well, that was a ruse so that they could destroy Building 7 that had all the records of all the criminals in it. Now, why was Building 7, that was nowhere near the trade centers, blown up and fall straight down like the rest of them? No planes hit it. Nobody's claimed they did it. They don't even claim that because they don't care. Look at over here. Look at over here. And then they're over here, they're doing their dirty deeds. Here we go again. I mean, this isn't speculation on my part. These are facts. And we have to look at facts. And you have to be careful whether you mix speculation with facts as well. And a person who's on the path to Gnosis doesn't do that. So you shouldn't have an axe to grind. You shouldn't have a horse in the race, as all these cliches tend to say. So the minute you have something in it, you're going to change the information to fit your reality so that you benefit from it. Well, a person of Gnosis understands that that is a vain, terrible thing to do that ultimately ends up in you getting involved in the lies. And once you get involved in the lies, you can never find the truth. Now, truth ultimately is going to be the things that save your life, help you, build you up, etc. So the benefit of knowing the truth far outweighs the gossip of that particular time. But you're going to get all sorts of people that don't want to believe anything. They don't want to get into any of this because it doesn't fit in there. And they don't really want to believe it. Bill Maher is a person like this, the actual TV host of his own show. Doesn't want to believe in 9/11. And if you tell him about 9/11 and you say the government was involved, he throws you out of his show. He doesn't want to believe that. He doesn't want to go through that because he lives in society. He makes money off of society. And this is a horrible thing. He doesn't even want to say, well, gee, I don't know. I don't want to believe that. I don't think that's true. We need to examine it. That's what you do with anything that you have a prejudice for. But he completely states that he won't do that because he won't go that far. He wants his sports cars, his big houses, pay his taxes. He wants all the things that Bill Maher is all about. So he doesn't want to believe that, whether there's so much evidence there. It just shows you how he's got blinders on for so many things and other things he just won't deal with. So these are the type of things. So does that mean that he has any credibility at all? No, he doesn't. So if he's doing it with that, how many other things is he doing? Now, it fits in with his ratings because he wants to get people that believe a certain way, and that's his crowd. So he's going to bring out certain things. But in general, he obviously has no abilities to find out the truth or interested in the truth when there are thousands of sources of people showing that this was an inside job. I don't think anybody believes that Bill Maher believes that this was a straight terrorist attack. And, of course, their passports fell on the street. They weren't burned up. We couldn't find much damage in engines. All the things, it just goes on and on and on. And, of course, Building 7 just fell down because I guess there's too many people were blowing in that direction that went to the trade centers. So they were exhaling that way, and that whole building was blown down like a bad comic book. So what do you say about these things? All the things just don't make any sense. There's so many weird things to go there that it's impossible to come to any conclusion exactly how this happened. But we certainly can come to a conclusion that these things was obviously done. They found thermonite, I think it's thermonite or whatever, these things that you use to bring buildings straight down. All this stuff has been there, and it's obvious. Buildings don't fall straight down. All of this stuff makes no sense whatsoever. And it doesn't take much of a brain to do it. And why are you fighting against that? So he's decided to take that, even against most of his audiences, doesn't believe that. Why is he doing that? These are part of things that people are told to do, or they will destroy your life. So there's all sorts of things there. So we go on and on with this. So you can't find anybody who is a good researcher. Here we go with Bill Maher. You like what he says. He talks about things that are helping society, trying apparently. Well, not. This guy is obviously a person that is being compromised. So the whole idea is what's going on there. We do this with everything. Anything I've ever looked into, I've found huge amounts of fraud and other things involved with it. And this started many, many years with me ago when I was researching after finding out that an interest of mine that I was researching, which was the runes and Nordic mythology, that one of the major writers there, as usual, the people involved in that movement were too imbecilic to write their own books. So this person, the head of the trapezoid order of the Temple of Set, which is this Germanic satanic magic, was writing all these runic books. And wasn't hiding it either. By then he was kind of known by a certain group of people there already. And he thanked Michael Aquino in the introduction and everything else. So all the people he thanked are all people that had these satanic belief systems within this movement tied to all this basically Arabic Satanism. Of course, Satan comes from the Arabic belief system, and that's where they're connected to. That's what an Aryan is, an Arab basically. They're Middle Eastern-based people from Iran. So the whole idea is that this is, and to the now even Edward Flowers states that he is researching that because that's his core. So finding all this out, I started looking into this and looking into Michael Aquino and the Temple of Set and everything else, and all these connections. So at least he didn't necessarily hide it that much, or maybe he didn't want to, and he thanked all those people, and of course it didn't hurt his career apparently. He kept going with his group, kept selling books. Now his books are available at Bear Books, Inner Tradition Books, Bear Books are all mixed together. The Israeli guy publishing The Nazi Satanist, and several other publishers. So, I mean, you know, it's a fact. You can find the books there. Just as simple as that. So it's not about I'm stating that. So this is a statement of fact. And what is fact? And all these things that go with it. So going into these areas, particularly when you get involved with more general things, and you can get a lot of information out there of what. And the latest thing, of course, that I kind of got roped into because of the satanic connection to the Son of Sam and the people involved in that. Now, the bottom line is that we don't really know. And we have to understand the fact that these are criminals that are doing criminal acts that also are involved in Satanism. They're not Satanists involved in criminal acts. So I think we have to understand that. This is just a convenient out for them. And I think that's an important definition. And Satanism has nothing to do with occultism. It's reverse Christianity. And whether they steal stuff, like all of these people steal everything from everybody else, they don't have an original thought, they don't have an original design, they don't have original anything, is pretty sad about their reality. So when you get involved in all this stuff and you listen to people and you know the background and you know about what is satanic cults and everything else, and then you listen to other people make statements, it is plain and simple, complete and total. They don't know what they're talking about. Now, is it disinformation? I mean, they're deliberately doing this, but I think a lot of it is just ignorance. They're not going to study something they're not interested in. I don't need to study Satanism. I know what they're doing. Well, that's not true. You've got to know what's happening. Now, when all these satanic stuff started in the past, the bottom line is that the police knew absolutely nothing. They were asking certain people, and they were starting to get booklets written on what is occultism, what is witchcraft, etc. And they are not the same. Now, are there people involved in witchcraft and other things that are committing crimes? Well, probably. I'm sure there must be. Just like there are Jews. You know, there's a lot of Jews that are involved in Satanism and have been gangsters, by the way. So for claiming that there's only 17 million Jews in the world, which I find hard to believe, but they're certainly everywhere, including in the Church of Satan, etc. So there's plenty of Jews everywhere. Apparently there were Jews in the Temple of Set as well, or at least people that have Jewish backgrounds. What does that mean? So it doesn't really mean anything, but it just shows you that it's everywhere. And there's plenty of religious people, and there's huge amounts of crimes done by and have been done by the churches. As a matter of fact, we can't find that book anymore, but we published a book called The Satanic Orgy. And what it did is it actually showed the church crimes that were committed. And there are books on church crimes which talk about the Catholic Church and all the crimes they did and all they're doing, including assisting and some people even think that the Catholic Church directly helped and assisted, and it was part of them with the Nazism and the building of it, because they certainly did help the Nazis in every possible way. So the Christians have an awful lot to own up to. Not to mention the recent two popes, both the last two are both basically Nazis. Pope Francis helped all the Nazis, came from a Nazi country, otherwise known as Argentina. So the whole idea is that this is where they settled, and Argentina welcomed them, and there are towns in Argentina that look just like Germany, and they only speak German. What does that tell you? So they also sheltered them and everything else. And, of course, the weak-kneed Western people didn't have the balls to go down there and take those people out. So all of that goes with that is a problem with the reality of what's happening. So you get all these issues here, and this clouds the issue of what's going on when you look at things. But this is what influences anything. So are you going to be able to get good information from the Catholic Church? No. Are you going to get good information from other people who refuse to even acknowledge something that happens that everybody believes? No. You're not going to get any good information from anybody. The good information is you have to educate yourself and then make your own decisions, and you have to be a smart enough or open enough or at reached a level of gnosis where you can understand when people are telling you. Now, this whole Son of Sam David Berkowitz issue that people seem to be involved in, a 50-year-old case, which makes no sense at all. What's the point of it? And they're not looking to solve anything of what's happening today. What they're really doing is just, this is some sort of comic book game for them. Anybody who seriously looks into these cases and is not looking at, well, what's happening now? Who are these satanic cults now? What are they doing? And how are they functioning? Now, all of these groups have been involved, these criminals have been involved in Satanism, and it continues to go. It's been embedded within them for whatever reasons, whether they're on the West Coast and these cults that came up from Mexico, and there's lots of satanic cults in Mexico. These are poor people. The church didn't help them. The government screwed them over, so they all jumped to the other side. So this is not unusual. So there are huge satanic cults in Mexico and operating on the border. There's a Church of Satan in Colombia. All this stuff can be found online, etc. So there are people following this just like there's people following everything else. But let's get into a lot of details here. When you get into this case, which can be checked out, and you can listen to people and what are they saying. People who claim to be great investigators are making giant. I'm not talking about little misstatements. I've made little misstatements. I called David Berkowitz, David Horowitz at one time, who was a news reporter in Los Angeles for many, many years and had lots of shows. But, that's a minor misstep. That's not really a fact. Everybody knew I was talking about David Berkowitz and not David Horowitz or some other things. I try not to get into too many details that are unimportant. So, what city they came from, what they're in. This generally doesn't tend to be a great important. I'm looking at the bigger issue myself in general. So, when we get into this, we have to understand that we have this reality that we have to look at, and it's quite shocking that people get everything wrong. Even people who claim to be professional investigators and everything else. Well, how can you trust them if they get such information wrong? And my question always is this. If this noted personality, this noted researcher, this noted author, this noted official of whatever they're in is getting something horribly wrong, how many other things are horribly wrong? And this is the big problem. So if they state this, and these are horribly wrong things, then I don't believe them on anything. I really can't believe anything until I verify it personally. And even that, if there's a statement by somebody, this guy wrote this on this piece of paper, what does that mean? He wrote something down. Well, it doesn't really mean anything. Even if he swore to it, even if it's notarized, what does that mean? It means nothing. People jump to conclusions, and there's a lot to jump to. There's a lot of bad people out there doing all sorts of strange stuff, and they're not very sympathetic characters. So when you get information and someone tells you something that fits into what you believe, you take it and say that's a fact. Well, I've always got good information from Bob Alexander. Bob Alexander always gave me good. So the information he just gave me is correct. And of course, we all fall into this trap. You assume if you get good information from someone once, you get it from them again. Well, it's just not true. And you can't really trust anybody. A prime example of this, and even though it may seem strange, is I worked with an airgun factory for a part of my life. And they had a foreman there, and they had a problem with a machine that was pressing down rivets. And I asked this guy, and he says, well, the machine's broken, it doesn't work. I said, well, it looks like it needs an adjustment, because it's just not doing its job. No. I said, has it done this before? No. It's the rivets. We need longer rivets. No, the machine needed adjustment. But he was at that company for 20 years and knew nothing about that machine. And I said, well, that doesn't make any sense to me. So we need longer. Well, they don't make long. Of course, they don't make longer rivets because of the fact that You just have to adjust the machine. So this guy who had all this experience, who used this equipment for many years, knew nothing about the machine that he had used for 10 to 15 years. So as a person who was new to that company, I said, well, this guy should know. He's been here. So we've got some sort of problem here. We're going to have to... No, the machine just needed to be adjusted. Yet this bozo idiot didn't know that. And he made me look bad because I was assuming that he was an authority when he was nobody. So the whole idea is that he was a foreman in that shop and knew nothing about that machine or anything else. So this is what you run into. Oh, well, shouldn't you trust the guy who's the foreman who's been there? No, you don't trust anybody. Everybody is a bozo. They don't know what they're talking about. They're misinterpreting everything. I see this all the time. And we're going to go into other instances here and we'll talk about it. But as I said, a professional investigator stated and this is on tape, in the Son of Sam case. And of course, everybody thinks David Horowitz, here we go again, David Berkowitz, that David Berkowitz knows anything because he was admitted to being, he's making up one story after another. And if you think that he was somehow a leader and given all the information, well, that goes against anybody who sets up any kind of organization. Now, what terrorists do is they set up cells, and that cells only knows, a cell is a small group, only knows what they have to do. Simple as that. It's the need-to-know basis, because if one of them get into trouble or get captured, they can't give the names of everything else. So I don't believe that David Berkowitz knows anything. I'm not even sure that he knows that anything had to do with some sort of satanic cult. He deliberately said that to make it look like it wasn't me. I was being forced other things. We don't know what the background of that is. And considering the kind of really garbage research that's went into this, and the people that are investigating are still using the same garbage information from this. So we can't believe David Berkowitz. David Berkowitz is a mental case. He's a sociopathic psychopath that we don't believe anything to. And what's good about him is that he comes off like such a nice guy. I don't want out of prison. I did bad stuff. I got caught up in it. So he's got all the things that people want to hear. So he's a very sympathetic character. It doesn't mean that he knows anything. And what he does know, even if he, quote, is being honest, which I don't think he is, what does he know? So, and he's giving a story out that people want to hear. He's told that to investigators that made their whole life over this one story. They didn't have any other business. They didn't make any other business. And that's Maury Terry. Maury Terry wrote a pretty bad book that he spent his entire life making money on and then refused to come out with the details near his death and came out with nothing. And all his information is sitting there. And when are they going to release it? 100 years from now? Everybody's scared. They don't want to talk. They don't want to do this. They gave a bunch of stuff to a Hollywood producer who could care less about this case. But that's how Maury Terry was making money. And he needed to make money. He wrote one book in his life, and that was it. He made money off of the same story for 30 years through the tabloids, who were the only people that would really talk to him, because it's the same shocking story. So he's going to come out with non-shocking information, boring stuff. Well, no, he's going to sell to the tabloids. He's going to come out with a bunch of nonsense. From what I know about Maury Terry from the statements of other people, and you can even see him in interviews, is that he was a fairly nasty, not nice guy. He used a lot of people to actually get information from and kept them in the dark. Each person only had a little bit of information. This comes from Carl De Niro, who claims to be a friend of his, but, we were good friends, but he never gave me anything, and we didn't talk about this or that. Same old story. So the whole idea is that this is what he states. So each person got a little bit because he didn't want anybody to know anything because he was selling this stuff. And he's not going to sell stuff that doesn't fit into his story. Do you get it? Do you see the problem here? I have to make money. I've written one book in my life. He's done nothing else. He was an editor for IBM. It's just unbelievable. And that job apparently was dropped. He did absolutely nothing and had all this information he collected before his death and didn't release any of it. Left it to some relative who threw it over. We don't really know what's going on there. But there is a whole bunch of information there, and apparently it's not being given to anybody. And why is that? So it's the same old story. But Maury Terry, from what I can see, had very bad information, and he wanted to tie things up to keep his story going. Now, his story going has to tie into things that are kind of more interesting than David Berkowitz, because he's not saying anything because he don't know nothing. And how much are we going to keep going over that story there? So he had to tie it into Charles Manson, who's really sexy in people want to read about. Also alive and was going until just recently. I mean, Manson has only been dead, I don't know, who knows, 5-6 years, whatever it is, if it's even that long. So he had to tie it into there, so he had more story to go. You can't keep talking about something that has a very limited informational base. So he wants to tie it into the two things that you can stretch out for your entire life and make money on. That is Charles Manson and the Process Church. So these are the two things that he kept beating the drum about that has no validity whatsoever. There's very little to any connection there. What connections there are, because you got to remember in those days, everybody met each other. You went to a town, you had to show up. There were no internets where you could go to their website and email them and everything else. You couldn't do any of that stuff. You had to show up everywhere. And that's exactly what Manson did. But there doesn't seem to be any direct connection. And Charles Manson never was involved in what we considered Satanism in its pure. He didn't use the symbols. There wasn't any of that. I think he was smart enough not to do that because that's going to turn everybody away from you. And I don't think he was a traditional Satanist. But of course, if you're in a criminal mind, you're doing all this stuff, that kind of fits in. You want to be into the negative dark power because that's strong. So, this is all stuff that people think in their head. There is evidence, at least coming from Charlie Manson, and we're not sure if he's telling us the truth or not. I mean, we don't know anything. And how is his memory or anything else? He claimed that he sent people over to England when the Process Church, which wasn't the Process Church at that time, they were an offshoot of Scientology, over there. But what does that mean? They were just starting out and everything else. Here we're getting into how organized and how much they work together. I don't believe this at all. So the bottom line is that from what Manson tells us, and we're not sure if that's valid or not. We can't go to the Church of Scientology and ask them either because they're not going to give us the truth as well. But Charles Manson states that he reached the highest level of Scientology and was cleared. Which is pretty frightening if that is true. So he went through all of it, took care of all his problems. It just shows you how all this self-help stuff really boils down to yourself. I can't really fault Scientology entirely for that. But if you graduate a program and you're not really versed in it, well, there's a problem there as well. So we don't know. Is Charles Manson a good source? Did he remember? This interview that he stated he sent somebody over to England. Well, that was 30 years after this happened. And he was saying that, it started out as Scientology and then turned into this. Well, it didn't start off as Scientology. That was a group from them. So I don't know what that is. It sounds like he's listening to more lies. It doesn't add up. Is he a person that doesn't lie? He's going to tell the truth? Yeah, just like Maury Terry, who's living off of this stuff. He wants to connect everybody there because it opens up a huge amount of books for him as he ties in. He can endlessly write on the Process Church. He can endlessly write on Manson. And he doesn't have to worry about David Berkowitz, who's basically a one-tune dude. Yes, this is it. I can't talk about it. Same old story. And that comes with all of them. They also, I can't release it. No, I can't release it. I can't. Why can't you release it? So what you're saying is that I have information I cannot substantiate and prove in a court of law. And if I state this, I'm going to be sued. The other thing is that I'm releasing information that's true, and they will potentially go after me, meaning that I can be killed. That's the two things are coming here. But most of it is the first thing. They have no way to prove this stuff, so they can't talk about it. And nobody's getting arrested, by the way. There's no Process Church members that are higher up that have ever been arrested. There doesn't seem to be any charges against them. It's all hearsay. And who started all this stuff? Maury Terry. And who is Maury Terry? A one-book writer that is trying to make money for himself and using a lot of other people. And a little interesting thing about him, per his friend Carl De Niro, is the fact that he couldn't use the internet. Now, these are all stated online. I'm not making up any stories here. If any of this is incorrect, let me know, and I'm more than happy. Put it in the comments below, and I'm more than happy to highlight it. But the bottom line is that he didn't use the internet. He's one of those guys that was kind of in between with his age, so he couldn't do that. He used a lot of people that he got free information from that he made money off of it. Simple as that. People like De Niro that went to him that was a victim of being shot were going there to seek answers, and I'm assuming for his own empowerment. He's written his own book, and there's nothing wrong with that. But they're all in it for their own. I guess he had time. Most likely he's on disability because he can't function, so he has time to go around and do all this stuff and so forth. So, but what did they know? Well, we can talk to all of the people involved in these things, and they make horrible mistakes, which are important to show how they're thinking. And again, if they get one thing wrong, they get all wrong. So the bottom line is that we can pretty much, we know who Maury Terry was. We know that all his conclusions are kind of bogus. And the whole idea is what information in his book has any value. Oh, well, the ones that David Berkowitz told us. The guy who's from childhood has been a psychopath, had head injuries, saw many people killed in front of him. I mean, if that information is correct, coming from a particular psychologist, Dr. Grandy, who has a PhD and who apparently has accreditation. And I wrote to him, and here's another instance. Dr. Grandy, where did you get your information on David Berkowitz? Here's the answer. There's no answer. He never got back to me. And they never get back to you. They're too busy asking, oh, support me on Patreon, but I won't answer any questions. No, they don't interact with people. People give them, want to know, well, where did you get that information from? Because he had a whole list on David Berkowitz of all these. He had 3 or 4 major head injuries. He went through all these other things. He poisoned pets. He was doing all these things. He was a bully in school. Yet we get information from another person who happened to be a police detective stating that David Berkowitz was the nicest guy in the world. He spent every afternoon with him, and he wasn't doing anything. He wasn't lighting fires then, yet he records that he was. Or, the timelines are difficult as well. It's very hard to sit down there. And do you really want to spend that time? So you listen to these people. So we got 2 different opinions here. That this guy from a PhD doctor who we don't know where he got his information from, to a guy who knew him as a teenager. Both of them don't really know anything. Psychopaths do not jump around drooling with their zipper down. So apparently this guy was good friends with David Berkowitz in high school, but he didn't go to high school with him because he went to a different high school, so he really didn't know what was going on there, except every afternoon they were together apparently listening to scanners following the police and fire department. So this is his rap and gives a completely different story, that he went crazy in the military because of the bizarre things that happened. Now, David Berkowitz joined the military and wanted to go to Vietnam. I'm not sure the war was even on then. You're talking about in the mid-'70s that there really wasn't much fighting going on. But again, it's a timeline. It's hard to figure out when did it end, when was there action going on. But he was sent to Korea, and this drove him nuts. And apparently it had been recorded that he burnt something down. Well, I know if you burn a building down, and he was convicted of that, would he get an honorable discharge, which apparently he did. Some people say he did. Some people say he didn't. We don't know. But it's hard to believe he wouldn't end up in Leavenworth for burning down a building if he has done that. But he was setting fires all the time. Oh, this just happened to start when he got in the military. Nonsense. He was doing this his entire life, and there's lots of things to do it. Matter of fact, when he was in school, he had to go to Dr. Grande. And again, it's all there. You can listen to him. I'm not making up anything. If these people want to change their story or say that I got it wrong, let me know. I don't want any misinformation going out there. Again, I'm just kind of giving you a bigger picture here. But this is provable. Here we got 2 different schools and nobody knows. And there aren't any investigators out there checking out any of this stuff. And here we go again. You write to the person who interviewed this particular detective who knew him. I tried to contact, and the guy said, F you, man. Dude, lose my email, dude. And, of course, Dr. Grande never got back to me. So how do you verify anything? Well, here we go again. You don't verify anything because you can't get anything. You have to find the records yourself. Well, you've got to be pretty bored and have an awful lot of money to spend your time on a 60-year-old case, which nobody really cares about. Now, the reason I'm interested in these areas is because I've been tracking these satanic cults for many, many years because of my involvement with Edred Flowers and his infiltration into the Nordic type groups and his books on runes. So that started it. I found other information from a Roy Tuckman, who's still on the radio after many, many years in Los Angeles. I don't know. But look up Roy Tuckman, Roy Hollywood Tuckman, and he has released this and a bunch of other metaphysical stuff, and he used to play a lot of information on the Temple of Set and these Satanist groups. So that's the reason I got into this, and then this is what you happen with. Now, all of this may be details you don't care about, but I'm showing you the line of information. Now, do you think it's any different with anything else? Well, you're fed lies and disinformation from everything. And it's not just the government, which now we expect it from them. It's not just people in authority. It's these so-called researchers, some of them who even claim to be professional private investigators. Their information is pretty poor. They're stating things that are easily checked out, that are not right. So this is how these things go. So how do you get good information if you're trying to get to the end of it? So everybody's trying to fulfill what Maury Terry said about this entire situation, that this was some sort of satanic cult and he wasn't alone. Well, it may have not been. But, what was the point of this? They still come up with the fact, well, they just wanted to cause chaos. Well, the point is that you're going to have to find some pretty distable people that are going to go out and just murder for this concept. And, of course, this is where the Process Church comes in. They were into everything. Now, and we'll get into them in a minute, and some really poor statements made by people of what they did. But the point is nothing has been pinned on them, whatever. They are a strange group, but basically their teachings weren't as strange. They wanted to be weird, strange, and present an image to gather attention. The bottom line is you never get anywhere unless you get someone's attention first. So, there's an old joke, and I've stated this in several of my lectures, that, a guy brought a mule over to this famous trainer, and he said, I can't get this mule to do anything. He just won't listen to me, no matter what I do, how much food I get to him. Well, the first thing that the trainer did is he got a 2x4 and hit the mule in the head with it. Now, of course, this is a joke. You don't do this, because you have to talk like, thought told me to beat animals. So the whole idea is that this is and the guy said, well, what are you doing? He said, the first thing you got to do is get their attention. So what did they do? They wore robes, they wore these. They didn't really wear upside down crosses. They wore crosses with snakes in it, combining the upper and lower self. Now, we all talk about this. Anybody who's into any kind of self-help talk about the higher self and the lower self. Now, your higher self is what manifests, which does everything for you. Your lower self is your primitive stuff, which is violence, sex, and other things. And you have to keep that under control. And I guess it has a purpose to some degree, but you're always balancing that. It used to be called right and left brain, and there was a study saying that, the reason why you're never getting anywhere in life and you're tired and you have illness is because the two sides of your brain are fighting each other. So the right and left half is fighting. The logical is fighting the illogical, and you never get anything done. You have to learn to combine this. And basically, that's what the Process Church was teaching. Now, and of course, this is a hardcore Scientology understanding as well. And basically, the Process Church, which started out, I always forget the name of what they started out with, basically was a ripoff of Scientology. Right down everything that Scientology did, they copied with their own little spin on it. And of course, everybody does this to some degree. There are very few new anything out there. So when we get into all that stuff, we need to understand what's going on there. So it's very, very important that this is fully and completely understood. So they got people's attention. They did this for a period of time. I don't know how many years they did this. And they did contact because they wanted to try and be successful. There is talk. They contacted the Church of Satan and Anton LaVey, and Anton LaVey rejected them because they were too weird. They were trying to make a living and find their feet. So, and they didn't have any problems, and to a certain degree, I also understand that. They didn't have any problems necessarily working to philosophical Satanists as they did to anybody else. And I understand that as well. Initially, I started off that way as myself, as I looked at Satan as, well, so what? I don't necessarily think that's horrible if they're not doing horrible things. The whole idea is that, someone who attacks you, you beat the hell out of them. You want to make as much money. This is the Machiavellian prince attitude, which is nothing new. And I didn't find much objectionable to most of that thing. I also believe it's kind of ridiculous to think that you can be a god. We don't even know what God is, but to think you're on that level is ridiculous. It's comic book absurd. But the fact is that, being strong in life, standing up to things, turn your other cheek. And not only your cheek, make sure you part those cheeks and bend over. Look at our symbol, a dead guy on a stick. So all these things, how can you relate to that kind of nonsense? So the whole idea is that, and no other culture has anything like that. Only that Christian belief has that weak. And of course, that was started by the Romans to make people weak so they could conquer them, because they were sick of all these pagan warrior religions, which were hurting the empire. So all of that is very important to understand. So we go through this, and all sorts of misstatements are made by all these people. They haven't done their research. They look into what is told. They get information from second and third hand people that have a gripe. So all these investigators know is what Maury Terry told them about the Process Church, which is just wrong. This is a guy who brought up in the Catholic Church, went to a Catholic high school, went to a Catholic university. He has no idea. He believes that anything that is any way hooked up with, quote, occultism is evil. And so he has no idea what the difference between really Satanism, which is a Christian cult, and what is magic, witchcraft, and other things, which has absolutely nothing to do with it. And they always like to throw Aleister Crowley and other things out there, who was technically not a Satanist. Oh, he said he was the evilest man. Yeah, again, didn't you get the fact? This is what he said to get attention. He's going to stand on the street corner and say he's Jesus like 50 other nut jobs. It's not going to get you anywhere. So the whole idea is that's the whole idea. And a lot of what he did was done in a dry humor way. Was he involved in strange things? Well, of course he was. What do you expect him to do? If he wasn't involved in strange things, he'd be in the Catholic Church doing what they do. So the whole idea is that this is how it all goes. So, people are kind of strange. Someone, they wonder why someone stinks of hot dogs when they run a hot dog stand. Well, he runs a hot dog stand. That's why he smells hot. Well, I don't get that. Doesn't he wash? Well, it's so ridiculous. So it's all these things. But the kind of errors you find, and I found this no matter any subject matter that I've ever studied, when I go and look at the research in it, you find out the kind of disinformation that's there. And it means that the investigators are just reaffirming where they already went in. So they have an opinion going in, and they're going to talk to people and believe the information that reaffirms what they already believe. That's bad investigation. That's a personal prejudice you need to learn how to get rid of. Now, we all have this to a degree, and if we can find information that builds you what you want to believe, well, you're going to go there with it. And, of course, that's what happens to all these people. But it's just wrong. You're not going to get to the truth this way. So the kind of misinformation there is unbelievable. The kind of things stated about the Process Church and everything else is that, they wore robes and stuff. That means they were evil. And they had these chains around. Well, isn't that interesting? What does that mean? A lot of people wear robes and everything else. It doesn't mean that they're involved in any kind of criminal activity. And particularly what we're talking about here is horrific murders, sacrifices, and other things, which is, part of this whole thing that pagans and Jews and everybody else have always been accused of from day one, is that you're killing babies. It's the same rhetoric that's went around for thousands of years. And it just doesn't hold that much water. So it just doesn't. So this is what his conclusion, that they were guilty because they were wearing robes. And this, of course, came from Carl De Niro, stated on a interview show. So, that's a jump. That's a big conclusion that you're making when you're talking about horrific criminal things. And, of course, they had German Shepherds, so that means that the dogs they found at Untermeyer Park, who apparently were sacrificed, they did that. Because you have them as pets, so it means that you're killing your own pets, which seems to me goes way past, generally you have pets and you honor them and love them. You don't go and cut them up. So the point is that, and of course, where was the people investigating this? Where is the police reports? Where's the people in that town? Some people have even said that Untermeyer Park, which is surrounded by houses, and certainly from what I've seen, there are some isolated areas in there, but it's hard to go around that place and do a bunch of stuff without being seen. But that may not matter because obviously there was no law enforcement there. Nobody goes in there, and that's another problem, a big issue of corruption and the fact that, the police department has thousands of places they don't go. You can't go in there. It's too dangerous. Well, shouldn't it be the opposite? They have lots of men and personnel to harass all sorts of people, but they don't have the time to do it. So these are how these issues tie in there. This whole story of the apostles of the 20, well, there's people that lived there that said this is all nonsense. And of course, it's interesting that these Satanists would come out of a Catholic high school. Isn't that interesting? So it's the same old story here. We gets back, the fruit doesn't fall far from the tree, is that the people doing satanic practices were Christians, or what you would call reverse Christians. But of course, they don't get that either. They don't understand the symbology of everything as well. So there's a lot of misstatements on one of his interviews as well. He stated that Timothy Wiley said he wasn't in the church. He wrote an entire book on that, but then he backtracked. He was kind of thinking there. But the point is that he wrote an entire book on that, and he's never stated he wasn't in the church as far as I understand. And his books really talk about the rebel angel, otherwise known as Lucifer or Satan. So he's always been connected in that and whatever. And he knows nothing about this guy. If I asked him what his history was, he probably would know nothing about it. He's never talked to them. He's afraid to call them, just like everybody else. Apparently, nobody has made contact. Well, I shouldn't say nobody. When this movie came out that Timothy Wiley's based on his book, he has lots of interviews from non-traditional people. It doesn't seem like any interview that he had was with a major news person, or even a middle of the road YouTube channel or anything else, except for one, which was done by a guy apparently he's into wrestlers. The Vice thing, I don't know, strange. But he went there as a comical thing and so forth. And so he knows nothing about him. I'm sure he doesn't know anything about his history and background. Timothy Wiley was an architect, graduated architect from an official college in England, meaning he went through that whole program and graduated. He's a heavy drug taker, particularly hallucinogens, all these things to there. So they had this odd philosophy of uniting the lower and higher self. And as I said, it's not really that odd. People do this all the time. And I've just mentioned how it's the right and left brain. So it's not really odd. So when you're dressing in robes and you've got these crosses on with snakes going up, but that was to be representing the higher and lower self. So yes, it was weird, but you're not going to go out there and sell Scientology. They tried that and they couldn't get an audience. Then they'd been outrageous in a time when people wanted alternative. They hated society. They were a bunch of kind of spoiled brats. There was a war going on. They were being murdered. So the youth and so forth wanted to go pass. And this is a natural thing that happens the rebellious time in youth. So you're not going to sell them on the church. If you want to sell the church to them, the church is there. They'll join the church. So they had to do something weird, and that's what they did and showed this. And they gained a lot of attention. They got people to buy their magazines, and this whole animal thing kind of pays. Everybody loves animals. So if you're standing on a street corner with a dog, people come up to you and talk with you and everything else. Maybe you'll sell them magazines. Maybe they'll give you money. All this adds up. And apparently they were dog lovers, at least Mary Ann was, who had these German Shepherds, otherwise known as Alsatians from the British, who renamed German Shepherds Alsatians because they didn't like the Germans, even though the British are Germans. Well, yeah, that's the facts again. Don't let me confuse you with the facts like I always tell people that disagree with me online. Oh, did I confuse you with the facts again? So that's the way it always is. So, all this stuff, and who has demonized them, and who does that fit into fill his pockets? Maury Terry. So, there's a lot worse groups than all these other people out there, and while the Process Church may have been everywhere, well, that's where all the action was. And I don't know if they were at places at the timeline or not. People keep quoting this. I don't know if they're right. They state that. It's been stated that Michael Aquino was at was stationed at the same place where they had that murder with that special forces officer whose name escapes me right now, that he was there at that time on that base. So I don't know that. That's been stated. Can we track him with that? I don't know. I don't take anything for that. Does that mean anything? Well, the military is people say it's a big world out there. This is one thing that one of these people state all the time. So it's not good. It's not a big world. Basically, what everybody says, it's a small world. Here you are in Tokyo somewhere walking on the street or going into a restaurant and you see your neighbor next door. It's a small world. And where the activity is where the Process Church was. That's right. They were in Atlanta, a big city, lots of Satanists in the South, lots of people that are going against the church because of all the things done to them. So you would be there. You'd also be in Chicago. You would be in New York, and you would be in Los Angeles. This is where the people are. You're not going to Fargo, North Dakota and starting a bizarre church. So I don't buy that they're there. Now, there are questions about them. And, of course, since these people don't have the guts and the courage to contact anybody from the church who have been alive up until recently. Timothy Wilde was alive until I think he died 5 years ago. Mary Ann, I'm not sure when she died. All this stuff makes things even more suspicious, but it hasn't been that long. Maybe I've got one date online that says 2005, which means it was quite a long time ago, but that's not been substantiated. I don't know. I'm assuming we could get information if I wanted to spend the time there. But Robert de Grimston, her wife, her husband, who started this, apparently is still alive. It says that he's 86. Nobody's contacted him that I know of, or probably he doesn't want to talk or whatever it is. But nobody has said I tried to contact him and couldn't. He didn't want to speak to me. So I don't know what that is. So nobody is contacted. We have this bizarre organization that apparently made a lot of money. And it's not just now with the actual saving of animals. They had a lot of money before that. They bought lots of property. They had other things. So they were able to do, from what I can only assume, I think it appears, that means we don't really know, that using the Scientology model, and they were teaching classes after classes. This is how you make money. So if you teach hundreds of people, and what is the cost of teaching a class? Nothing. That's why they're so popular right now. And I think there's like $15-20 billion a year is spent on education and courses now. It's a huge industry, and it always has been. So how do you get money from people? Well, they didn't have lots of members in the church. It has varied from anywhere from 40 to about 200 people as members. But what does that mean, members and everything else? Again, all this is, you had to give all your money, you had to be celibate, all this stuff. Yeah, we were having orgies, all the stuff that doesn't make any sense. So, but the way you make money from people is they were selling their magazine, apparently thousands of copies of them. So, and if they had enough people out on the streets doing this, you'd be surprised how much money you could make. They also were begging everywhere. So they were doing that, and we all know, I don't know if you do know, but there's a lot of money in begging. The other thing you do is you teach courses. This is what Scientology does. And they say, look, you've got to have this car. So I don't care what you sell your car, sell your home, do whatever it takes to get the money to do this. So I'm assuming they were saying similar type stuff, and they were having a lot of courses, and that's where they made their money from. Now, what you always want to do is trace the money. Well, how were they able to do all this stuff? This all of a sudden, after going through, and they went through many changes. They stopped having the dogs and wearing the robes and all those strange stuff they were wearing, and they started to wear suits and ties. And we have a picture of them with this suit and ties on. So one of the suit and tie areas that we actually have on there is when the Process Church met with, and that's the picture we have on this particular video here, is the fact of the Process Church meeting with Governor George Wallace. Now, I don't know how this was arranged or not, but it was. And we have pictures of them, and of course, you always want to do that. Somehow they were able to worm themselves in there to do this. Now, however that happened, who knows? But that's all part of the Process Church and what they were good at. That's how you make lots of money. But so I'm assuming they were teaching all these courses. Now, Timothy Wiley stated that the organization, I don't, in terms of, nobody follows up questions with this stuff, so you can't get good answers again. You get a guy there, you ask him a good question, but it's the follow-up questions that are important. And why? Oh, I'm not sure. I think we made like $2 million a year. Well, if that's the 70s or 80s, that's probably equivalent to $10 million, which is a lot of money, especially some. So if they were putting away millions of dollars a year, that would add up. And they certainly didn't spend that much money. When you live in groups like this, people live, 10 people in a room or whatever, that you have your own nice place. Well, it's a lot of money you could put away. So if they were making that kind of money consistently from teaching courses and begging and all the other things, selling their magazine, then this would have a fair amount of money. And they did. They bought property. Marianne claimed even bought a huge place, or at least took a mortgage out on it, for $900,000 in the 80s, I believe this was. So that would be something that would be equivalent to $5 or $6 million today. And ultimately, they were unable to pay the mortgage on it, which is pretty bad. But the bottom line is they had the money to do that and put the money down or whatever they contrived to do. So the whole idea is they weren't living in places. They were living in deserted places. When they originally started, they were living in abandoned buildings. In Mexico, I believe it was, they found some place. This is what they were doing. These aren't people who are going first class saying, yeah, it costs a lot of money, the Hilton's full. No, they weren't doing this. These are people that were used to living with nothing, eating virtually next to nothing, and on their... So we don't know. Why were they around everywhere where things were happening? Because that's where the action was. Of course they were in Atlanta during the Atlanta child murders because Atlanta was a big action place. Of course they were in New York when all this was happening. I don't think it's coincidental whatsoever. I think why wouldn't you be there if you're a serious organization? So I think it's the opposite. And then people come to conclusions, well, they're wearing robes in this, that means they're butchering babies in the backyard. I've heard this for years as an occult scientist, that's what everybody thinks you. Every time anybody sees the word occult, you are demonized instantly. This is one of the problems that this organization has had for years and why we're moving away from that. And we'll totally move away from that soon as we change the names of our books and everything else, because it's an unfair prejudice. We are manifesting scientists. I'm a subtle energy physicist. That's what this is all about. I've always looked at things from the scientific background. Ancient magic is nothing more than ancient science. That's what they did back then, taking nothing and making something out of it. So there's nothing there that isn't. And, science does a lot of bad things, by the way, as well, if we want to say that there's something pure about it. How about making all sorts of weapons? How about the atomic bomb? How about mustard gas that was created by the Germans in World War I? That was done by scientists. Matter of fact, the person who invented that, his wife killed herself because of this horrible thing he made. What about all those things people are doing? Oh, no, science is pure and wonderful. There's not a single invention of science, particularly military weapons, that have not been used against their own people. This is a fact. So, we have to understand all this when we get into these different areas here. So let's get into that issue again to show you the kind of misstatements that are out there by people that know absolutely nothing. And one of these people that knows absolutely nothing has talked about this. Now, the one thing they've talked about is the meeting with George Wallace. Now, they have, and let me pull that up here so I can talk about it. And it just shows you the kind of terrible background that people have. Now, this is the picture, and of course, that's what this particular video's main picture is there. I don't have to show other images, but I want to blatantly show here of the misinformation here. This is a very interesting picture, and it shows you how middle of the road they were. And I don't know why people think this is bizarre. They were a Christian church, and Wallace was one of those crazy Christians. being a good Christian, hating all them black people. So the whole idea is that it's very important to understand that. So they were able to get in there. They had money. They talked to somebody who was sympathetic to their cause, and they looked very normal. So there are 5 people in this picture from the Process Church, and of course, Dilly Danby, Governor Wash. So there's a total of 6 people here, and it appears they were also, it looks like 2 of the church members were actually, they grabbed his hands who he put up, and it doesn't look like he's too welcoming it, but of course, this is typical of Marianne the prostitute being shown there, Marianne McLean. She made sure he grabbed her hand so she could make a physical contact. I'm sure that was part of it. But let's look at it. We've got 3 guys over to the left here. And I'm not sure the guy in the front there, it looks like the guy behind him may be Grimston, and the guy next to him kind of in the center looks like it's Timothy Wilde. Looking very spiffy. Now, 2 of the guys have suits on. Did you get that, people? These are suits. Now, they appear to be, I don't think they're even black suits. It's hard to say this is a black and white picture, but they don't look black. They look more like, and they said they moved into gray and blues and other things so they would be less ominous than black. Because, I used to tell people when I had more of a culty organization, don't wear black. People think that you're some sort of Satanist. So this is a real problem. If you're going to walk around in black all the time, you're giving that image out. Now, 2 of the guys have suits on. And it's hard to say, I was going to say they're 3-piece suits, but they're suits. They have jackets on and they have ties on. Suits and ties. Now, old Timmy, baby, Timmy Wilde, he was probably stoned out of his mind there on some Jeeper Creeper biddings from ayahuasca, seeing birds flying in his nose. So the whole idea is that Timmy in the back has what appears to be a turtleneck on with a formal type shirt. So he was typically casual 80s then from what I can make out here. It's hard to say. So, but he did have a turtleneck on and he had a jacket over that. You could say that's kind of a sports jacket. Now, the 2 women don't have robes on. They have kind of plain dresses on. And, of course, they look very plain and down. It's hard to believe that Marianne was I guess she was a dominatrix, but certainly is not made up. There's no great makeup there. Their hair is that typical 70s nonsense parted down the middle. They don't look very good. They are wearing kind of a pullover, very conservative dress. Of course, neither of the girls have really anything to show, but they certainly had the dresses were buttoned up. So there was no cleavage showing. Now, every single one of them are wearing a large necklace. Now, what did the idiots say out there? The professional investigators who, I know all this stuff. I'm a really shy guy. Yeah. So the whole idea is, what did they know? What did they say? Well, this is shocking. I remember him talking to Carl De Niro stating that, did you see that picture with them? And they got all these pentagrams they're wearing and they're talking to George Wallace. Pentagrams? Well, it's very interesting because they don't have pentagrams on. That's what an ignorant person would state that knows nothing about any kind of symbolism. And that's pretty much everybody who is involved in this area of investigation. They're plain and simple don't know what they're talking about. So, it is complete misinformation that they are easy to do. Well, that reaffirms their belief system to show that these people are horrible Satanists. And of course, first of all, pentagrams, which is an ancient symbol used by the church and in many churches all over Europe, by the way. So you'll see the pentagram, which some people state is the 5 wounds of Christ. And get that, 5 wounds, there's 5 points. And it's also the sign of Venus, from what I understand. But, all this stuff gets used by different people, just like the skull and bones that pirates used came from the Knights Templar. And when they were thrown out of the church, they became pirates. They had a large fleet. Now, that's the gossip there as well. We think that's the case, because we don't know nothing. So, and of course, a pentagram that is satanic in actual understanding is, plain and simple, is the pentagram turned upside down or reversing the positive energy. So that's important to understand. Now, is that complicated? How many people know that? Well, anybody you would talk to has a background in that area, which you would think investigators like this would, but they won't talk to you. They don't want to talk to anybody that knows anything, and they don't want to talk to anybody who is non-corruptible. So they want to talk to people they can manipulate and who are part of their gang. And it seems to be a whole group of people that feed their lies to each other. So the bottom line here is that if we look at this picture, first of all, let's get things. First thing I said, boy, that's weird. So I went and looked at the picture. They're not wearing pentagrams, and they probably wouldn't have got in to talk to old Georgie, psycho boy, wearing pentagrams. And they were well aware that the pentagram itself, even to this day, if you wear a pentagram, is a symbol that you're an occultist, and generally not a good one. I remember meeting some goofball guy who was wearing, I said, what, are you a Wiccan? Because, people don't wear pentagrams out there unless they're, but they're making a statement. And if they wear it upside down, it means you're a Satanist. But it's jewelry, man. I'm wearing the Satan shirt. Yeah, I'm Brian Johnson from the comic book, man. I'm cool. So, with psycho Christian Kevin Smith, he's always talking about Jesus, but he puts people on camera wearing satanic symbols. That's the kind of stuff that bothers me. But, it's unlikely that he is a Satanist. But, hey, that's everywhere. You go to your stores and you can buy these shirts right off the racks because, the rock star do it. So, what are these symbols? Well, I'm an idiot. I looked at it and said, the minute I looked at this picture, it didn't even take me a concentration. I said, those are not pentagrams. What are they? They're stars of David. So apparently, these people who seem to know nothing about this field claims that they don't even understand. Now, it's not too difficult because, first of all, the pentagram, as I mentioned, there's 5. And, of course, this was as I said, it was used in many ways. It's one of those symbols that has been used for thousands of years, very similar to the swastika that the Germans stole, that has been used and still used heavily in India now. The swastika before the war was on everything, particularly a lot of British books on good luck coins and everything else. The swastika was a symbol of good luck, the sun energy, positive, renewal. And you can't really miss that. Now, nobody uses it anymore because it's been fouled by the stealing people that are typical of negative people. They don't have any imagination. They steal from everybody else. So, I've said this before, and it's so true. But if you look at this, how many points are on that star? Goomba, guy from the street, hey, yo! So the whole idea, my family's from the Bronx as well, baby. So the whole idea is that it has 6 points. Teach me that in PS 1216 on Bleecker Street. 6 points. Maybe you should pull both your hands out, put them in front of you, and count on your fingers. So the whole idea is that don't show me your ignorance to that level. I'm sick and tired of this ignorant nonsense coming out. There are 6 points of that. Plain and simple, that is the Star of Jehovah, which they moved into more Christian stuff, Jehovah, and that is plain and simple that. And it doesn't take skill. Now, this guy's telling you, I know everything. I know everything. I so dope. I was in with the mob. I'm a wise guy. So the whole idea is all these guys are saying, and I don't mean in terms of wise guy, but he's smart, street smart. So the whole idea is that this shows you, it's so bad, it's laughable. Now, and tried to contact this guy several times, he refuses to get back to me. Well, of course he does, because I know more than, I don't want to do that. I don't want smart people. I want to be a manipulator. So everything this guy writes in particular tends to be very sensational. This is what grabs people's attention. He's doing the same thing the Process Church did to get attention, yet he wants to criticize them. So I have no idea what these people are doing. A lot of the church, and there's that new movie out, which I haven't seen, Sympathy for the Devil. And I don't know if it's sympathetic. Again, they're getting into areas to grab you. And anybody who thinks of anything metaphysical, as I've stated already, this conflict between the right hemisphere, the left hemisphere, the higher self, the lower self is not. That's what they were teaching, and that really is a very core understanding, by the way, of Scientology, which who hasn't been in Scientology? But this is the kind of gross misunderstanding of occultism that we get everywhere. People criticize occultism, and to this day, they said there's zero proof. I remember reading on one of the YouTube channels, zero proof after all these years that there's anything to this psychic power stuff. And they believe this. I just heard another person criticize all this stuff, thinking that, and what's so bizarre about the fact that you could possibly do this? Because they live in their personal poo, they can't think of anything else that's outside of their little reality. So this falls into this prejudice against people. And of course, there's lots of prejudice against people that have any kind of empowerment, because you don't want people to have empowerment you can't control. There's been 150 years of research into the psychic sciences and research done by top professionals right up to recent times. And there's huge amounts of information that have never been released because it was research done for the intelligence agencies that cannot be done. Now, top scientists like Russell Targ, Hal Puthoff, these are people that have PhDs in laser science and everything else. I mean, these are highly educated people, and there's many others like them. There are just hundreds of people. There are thousands of research that's been done for almost 150 years now. So you don't want to read about that. They don't read about any of this stuff. They read from people who are basically disinformation agents and out-and-out liars like the unamazing Randy, who perpetrated this stuff for years, and their group of people, which are clown college graduates, convicted felons, and I could go on of the people that are the dumb bunkers and idiot skeptics that don't have a background. So even Skeptic Magazine guy, who is educated and does have a degree in, I think, psychology. He's not a scientist. He's just has a degree. But at least he's semi-educated. But he was another guy that spent 8 or 10 years of his life preaching for the Mormon church, or at least it appears it was a Mormon. But he states he was an evangelist out there. Wow. So now he's against everybody. And the reason why he is for the skeptics is the fact that his girlfriend, who he's going to marry, was crippled in a car accident. He said, well, why would this happen to me? I prayed to you. I was on your side, God. Why did you let this happen? And certainly a serious and good thought by him of what. But that's the story with him as far as I understand. As you said, all of this is alleged. I don't know anything. Everything is right. But, the statements I've made is on tape by these people, and it is irrefutable. This is what they've said. So they've also said that Michael Aquino was a general and worked for the NSA. Well, he wasn't a general. He was a lieutenant colonel in the reserves, by the way. Some weird situation of what he was there. But he was a lieutenant colonel. And from what we can tell, he never worked for the NSA. Now, he did go to school for national security. And he went to all these schools, and that's one of the reasons why he was so low. So he was not NSA as far as we know, possibly, but he was in intelligence. I'm not sure if that's a big stretch that he had some contact with them. So he was an intelligence, a psychological warfare guy, and he was a lieutenant colonel. And I found a page that lists everything on Michael Aquino that I'm going to be posting here soon, the link, so people can go there. And it shows everything he ever did in his life and all the badges he got and all the awards he got. It's a very interesting site to kind of figure out who this guy was. And again, nothing was pinned on him. Does that mean anything? I don't know. But there's some major problem if people are committing huge amounts of crime and they're never arrested or convicted. He's even written a book about the alleged child molestation cases on his, which I'd like to read and get his side of it. But, that's his side of it. You've got two sides here that don't make any sense. But, of course, nobody followed up on that. There's been statements saying that on Michael Aquino that the military had a lot against him but didn't want to go through with it. Other ones said they didn't have enough. And, of course, the follow the fires. The records in that place caught on fire. Here we go again. But it's just so blatant. So here's a guy that comes out and tells you they're wearing pentagrams there. Pentagrams. You don't know the difference between the Star of David and pentagrams? I mean, this is such a blatant, ignorant statement and such a misstatement. We have the pictures here, people. I'm not making this up. And you don't even have to know much. Pentagram, 5 points. This has 6 points on it. It's the Star of David. And it's a black and white old picture. I can't really increase it enough to see what it says on there. But this is not a pentagram in any way whatsoever, which, again, denotes negative things, even though apparently it comes from Christianity. Or maybe the Christians stole it from the pagans, which is usually what happens. Most things were stolen from the pagans, moved into the Christian church, and this is the way it always goes. Just like a lot of their churches are built on pagan holy sites, because that's where people went. So we need to understand that. So we have all this, and it's the same old misinformation nonsense that nobody can think of. So this is people that claim that they're top investigators. They know everything. They've done all the research, and they're convinced. This person also states the fact that how wonderful Maury Terry is. He spent his life doing it. Maury Terry knows nothing. Everything he did was to make money. He had no other money coming in. He wrote one little book. I'm not sure if he made much money from The Ultimate Evil or not, but he figured out that he had to milk that for the rest of his life, and he had to bring in Manson and everybody else. And I'm surprised he didn't bring in space aliens to do that as well, but he didn't live long enough to give him a chance to do that. So this is the kind of misinformation you're going to get. So here we go. So the whole idea is, can you take, these people make constant misstatements. They're saying wrong stuff, which are easily checked out. How can you possibly say that Colonel Aquino, Lieutenant Colonel Aquino, which is one step under a general, by the way. The next promotion would be a general, but he did not. He's not a general. I'm sure he would have put that up there. He was a Eagle Scout kind of guy. He wanted, rank is important, and that's what the military is all about. It's all about rank. So that was not something hidden. So as far as I know, so the bottom line is everything you look on him says Lieutenant Colonel, the one thing under a general. But he's not a general, and plain and simple. The fact that he was at places where things happen certainly makes you want to think. And apparently being a lieutenant colonel, and I don't know if he was in these different places or not, but it means that you can do whatever you want. The military, if you have rank, you don't question rank, period. So no matter what they want to do, it's okay. So who knows what's going on there as well. I certainly don't give much credit to him either, but we do have to stay to the facts. The point is, if this fact is wrong, that how much other stuff that this guy and everybody else reports is misinformation, or they've gotten it wrong. Well, that's the scary part of it all. It means that once you find a glaring error from anybody, then you have a problem. This person also interviewed somebody on the, and of course it's on the Michael Jackson legal case in Santa Barbara, where he was actually tried for that. Now, Michael Jackson is a weird guy, and I think he did a lot of things he should not have. I'm not sure if he ever was a direct molester. He was a very strange guy. He did a lot of very inappropriate things, acting like he was 10 years old himself. So if he was naked and they were sleeping in bed with them, which could be, I don't think most 10-year-olds think much sexually about that. But the point is that whether he was sexually inappropriate or not, I don't really know. He certainly was weird and brought all this on him. And people have stated that he not only was a pedophile, but he was in a pedophile ring. That he did all this stuff and brought children to other. Now, I don't know that. This is what's being stated on this person's show and everything else. I don't know. I do know that trial, which he was found innocent of, was the kid that brought the charges against him was someone that was harassing numerous stars. Chris Tucker, Jay Leno, and a whole bunch of other people went to that trial and testified that this kid was trying to blackmail him, and he didn't feel there's anything true to it. And this guy had a long list, this family, of extorting celebrities. They knew how to do this. This was their career. This is how they made money. So we don't know. So that trial in general was very bogus involved with that. Now, whether there's other activities and other things, well, who knows? As I said, he was acting like a child and being an adult, and that is frowned upon. And how far did all this go? Well, I don't know. And it's amazing how there's never any. And the other things you get from all these people, oh, I can't, I'll tell you off the air. I can't, I'll tell you off the air. Well, what does that mean? Well, there's only two things that off the air means. It means you don't have enough proof to state it publicly because you're afraid of being sued. So you can make statements, but you can't back it up. Well, that's pretty bad because, again, where did your information come to? And if you can't back it up, then technically it's just hearsay. Someone else said that. I have proof. This guy I know told me. Well, what validity do they have? The other thing is that possibly these people are dangerous. But, you know, it's amazing if Michael Jackson was involved in this pedophile ring and they had the names of a whole bunch of people, well, nobody else was prosecuted. And you could say, well, it's all part of the con. Well, they went after Jackson. Why not go after all his buddies? Why not break up this pedophile ring? Wouldn't that be a feather in your hat as the prosecutors in Santa Barbara County? Well, it never happens. So, and we could talk about that for hours as well. But the bottom line is it seems like they were willing to prosecute Michael Jackson, but no other people, which they were involved in this. And nothing ever happens after that. So you get one misstatement after another. And I've seen this from a whole bunch of people that have been on, that have made statements on different shows, including particularly that show. You've got what apparently are some good cops who made misstatements. One of the statements that was made by one of these cops was the fact that Dick Grimston was at the animal sanctuary, the Best Friend Animal Sanctuary. Now, the animal sanctuary started 6 years after the divorce of Mary Ann from Dick Grimston, otherwise known as Robert Moore. She was married to a guy named Dupree, who, if you look at the animal sanctuary, is running it right now. It's his name that's up there, this Dupree. If I have that name correct, I think it's Dupree. Grimston was thrown out of the church because Mary Ann didn't like the fact that he had an affair with somebody. He took the woman he had an affair with, left the church, and started a new life. Tried to get some money that was due him, and from what I understand, was not given. So, as usual, free sex is wonderful until it involves your mate. So, all of this is part of what went on there for people to understand what exactly is happening there, and what's happening there is a bunch of nonsense. Again, it's a misstatement. There are people saying that Grimston showed up there anyway because he was part of it, even though he was outside. It doesn't seem like there was much contact. And again, he isn't in the new movie. Mary Ann isn't. I guess she's dead. All the stuff at the time the movie was made, I guess. I want to see the movie, Sympathy for the Devil. But the church broke up then because of that. So, and Mary Ann McLean was a very obnoxious, very low-level, typically conservative type Scottish person who was very dictatorial, and there's talk that she was a prostitute, probably true, but she wasn't just a prostitute, apparently. Again, this is hearsay. What do we know? Was it true? But she was a dominatrix. So the point is what does that mean? It means she had a very particular attitude. Maybe she took that dominatrix style into her life, and apparently she was very pushy, very obnoxious, and so forth. And there's been all sorts of stories, and we just don't know what is true or not because it's somebody's opinion, or maybe I kind of remember that. It kind of fits into what they want to remember. Maybe it fits into their own kink or whatever, but it doesn't appear that Grimston, Robert Moore, his name, nor his wife, his new wife, were involved in the Best Friends Animal Sanctuary. Now, we just don't know again. I have to look into that and spend a lot of time there, but he wasn't there. Now, a top police detective stated that, and of course, he never went to the animal sanctuary. They never checked it out. They don't know what's going on. And why? Why is this? If you think the Process Church is this terrible place, why aren't you investigating them, period? Yet there has been no investigation. There is some great questions because this organization is filthy with money. And how did they do that? Now, when they started this place, they had quite a bit of money from what can be appeared. They had several properties. This was part of the marriage settlement and the arguments over land and everything else. And apparently, de Grimston gave up most of his property. If I remember from what I read there, is that he didn't make much claims to this. He apparently maybe had lots of cash, and he didn't want to fight it out with them over properties. But they had all these properties in different places that they sold and so forth. So she went there with several $1,000,000. Possibly, maybe more. Maybe she had 5 or 10 million. She went there and built this sanctuary up with her new husband. And they were smart. They knew it. After all, they got to Governor Wallace. So they knew how to milk the system. They knew how to get into it. They knew how to use PR agents and other things, and were able to now establish themselves as this animal sanctuary. And people give millions of dollars to animal causes. Just the way it is, trying to raise money for the homeless, and people say, who cares? Well, there's 2 dogs over here that are homeless. Oh, yeah, how much money do you need? You want a $10,000 check here? This is how it works. So, but we don't know. I would like to know where all this money comes from. And of course, they are a nonprofit, and they post their actual financials are online to look at, including everybody who runs that organization is listed there. So and you have to do this as a nonprofit. You have to be transparent. You have to tell people what you're doing. Your finances, your bank account, everything else is not your property, because society is allowing you not to pay taxes, and as such, you have to be transparent. Got it? So, and of course, nobody talks about that. Nobody looks into that. And all these guys that are, oh, yeah, we're doing all this research. We're all these great investigators. What? Well, what have you gained from all this? So they report hearsay. Why do they report hearsay? And they think that, well, I know this guy. He doesn't lie to me. He may have gotten wrong information himself, and all he's doing is repeating wrong information to you, and because you think he's a good guy, that the information is true. It's not true. You're doing this so that it's the sensational aspect of it. Now, the problem with that is that if you look at stuff like this, it means you've gotten everything else wrong. I can't believe a single thing that any of these people say. I don't believe a single thing that Maury Terry has written. I don't believe any of it. It's all nonsense. He doesn't really have anything. He was not in the police department. He didn't have any connections there. He had a whole bunch of yes men. He ran this as a business so he could make money to the very end. And then when he had a chance to come clean, he's dying. I believe it was cancer, whatever it was. He's dying here. He couldn't put it out. He left his records apparently to a cousin, some woman that knows something. And there's been talk online that it was left to a movie producer, or the cousin gave it to movie producers. What does he care? It's just another story he can make money on. It's not like he's making one special after another. They even sold, or the guy had rights to the story initially, was an actor. DeFranco, was it DeFranco, if I'm correct or not? He bought some rights to it to see if he could shop it around, and eventually couldn't get funding for the project or what. So, and who is DeFranco? I mean, he seems like just a goofy little actor to me, but this is what actors do. You got to make your own business and so forth. But he doesn't have no interest. He thought the case was sexy. He thought it was interesting. So all of this is very important to look at the picture. So can you believe anything that anybody tells you, even if they've done some good reporting in some other areas? They've dug up some facts? Well, not really, because they're making stories that are sensational, that'll get people to listen to them so that they can make money. And what happens with all these people is they all seem to be begging for money. They've got problems, they've got ex-divorces, they've got college to pay for. Well, they're begging for money all the time, trying to make money from doing things. And they're not going to put out boring information that is not sensational so that people don't bother listening to it. So if you come out with a rational story that isn't sexy and doesn't have a lot of stuff, people aren't interested. So this is all how it works. Now, this is very important for people to understand the Gnosis aspect. So how do you find truth? Who's telling the truth? Well, these are the kind of things you have to look at. So if you want to verify something that someone's talking about, well, you look at stuff like this photo and the misinformation that has been. So this guy goes out and tells everybody this story because he thinks it's really sexy, yet it is not a pentagram. It's the Star of David. So So that's pretty vulgar and horrible disinformation. And it's even hard to believe that this person actually believes that's a pentagram because it looks like a star. So it's just like people who put on their rock albums. They put a star up there, but they put a circle around it. Well, you know, stars are used everywhere. When you put a circle around a star, that has very occult meaning. So we have to understand that as part of it. So if you can't get this right, what else? And I find this with everybody. So where do they come from? That's why I always like to ask, well, who is this person? You know, what if they? I always look at that in terms of when I get information about a person. What is his axe to grind? What is he putting in there and twisting because he's a Christian? He's Jewish. You know, they try and make everything into this complete occult nonsense. And one of the big things with the Son of Sam case is Ottomeyer Park. Ottomeyer was a Jewish guy. And he was a very wealthy Jewish guy. The family was wealthy, etc. He was an attorney. And they want to tie things in that he's this conspiracy guy. Well, there's nothing in Ottomeyer Park that I haven't now went through there with a fine-tooth comb, and I've never been there. But they try and make this out to this great satanic representation there. It just isn't. It's built in old style, what you would call classical Roman, Greco-Roman. And this would include things like a Saturn temple, which is a god. So are we saying that the planet Saturn really means Satan and that we've been using that? Well, it's not true. Groups have demonized the Romans by taking one of their gods and making them into a demon. So in the statues there and everything else, there's nothing that isn't really in Ottomeyer Park that I've seen that isn't really something that is considered a Greco-Roman. And that's what the actual architect who made that place put in there. And the fact that they brought stones in from Europe and everything else, well, what does that mean? This guy had literally today would be a billionaire. He had all the money he wanted to. Yet, and if it was a great temple that he wanted to keep, you know, he didn't leave any money to take care of it. He donated the land when he died with no money to sustain it. So here they've got all these acres and acres of land, which cost a fortune to keep up and no money to do it. So he really cared about that place, didn't he? Well, he wasn't stupid. This was a very wealthy man. He figured that, look, I'm giving you the land, you take care of it. But if you really cared about it, you would at least give them upkeep money, at least for, I'm going to give you upkeep money for 10 years. And then after that, you have to take care of it. None of that was done. So all of this is, oh, it's Roman stuff, it's demon. You're a pinhead. You're a dumb pinhead who is just babbling information of no value. And that's what everybody in that entire case is. And they're trying to come up with a lot of stuff. And Maury Terry wanted to write endless books and have endless interviews talking about the spook in the closet that doesn't exist, otherwise known as the Process Church, because they were an easy target that have never ever been linked to anything. There's nothing they've ever been linked to. There's people who state stuff just like the great source David Berkowitz. Well, he's a real trusting source. So we're going to get good information from him, who then of course says this and to get the pressure off of him, and then of course has no substantiating information after it. Same old story. So if you're going to seek, the bottom line is you have to seek truth. You have to know what's going on so you don't get caught up in the illusion of what's going on. And that's what this whole society is about. And people feel important that they have found sources and other things. At this particular point, everybody I've contacted has been aloof and unhelpful, who has been connected with any of this area. All of this stuff doesn't seem to add up much. And then people think they know what they're talking about because they're following what Maury Terry said. So I've even had a person who contacted me running a group that says, I have a private group on here and everything else and so forth, but then doesn't even invite me to the group. They want to keep their own liars in there. So no credibility whatsoever, and everything to them is occult and the Process Church as well. So it doesn't seem like that's a credible group either. People are trying to do things, but if you don't bring in experts who know what they're talking about, they don't want to talk to me because I'm not a yes man. Oh, yeah, it's all these bad guys. It's all the Process Church. Yeah, come and join us. No, when you tell them that this is a bunch of nonsense because you're seeking the truth of it, they don't want to have anything to do with you. So all those Gnosis students out there, this is a fantastic Gnosis area that I've just told you about, so you understand what's going on. Now, I've said this many times, and I always follow big stories like this, and I've talked about the Boston bombings where 25 people were dead. 2 days later, there was one person killed and a couple of people injured. It's all lies and misinformation, and what's going behind the scenes is never, ever reported. So, what happens with all these things is we get into these horrible areas and we live in this vengeance type area. Now, in the Chicago and the Boston bombings and everything else, they went after people and they murdered them. Now, whether they were involved or not, we just don't really know. But if you're allowing police to go out and assassinate people because they firmly believe they're in it, well, that's not what the police system's about. These people need to be arrested and tried to find out if they are really involved instead of being this guy's friend, this guy's buddy, maybe he's involved, and all this stuff. So we get into all these things that it's a big mishmash of lies. So if you approach everything like that, if you approach everything from it appears, this may be, if you look at what people are saying and go to their interviews, if you listen to their interviews all the time, you find out the lies and misstatements that they're making. Or at least, I don't know if they're lies entirely, but they certainly are very easy to repeat anything that fits in with what they think. So whether they deliberately do it, who knows? But, you're not doing very good research if you buy into all this stuff. So getting back to that picture of Governor Wallace, I mean, here are guys, two of them are wearing business suits that are appropriate for that time. The other one's wearing probably a sport jacket or a fairly nice jacket with a turtleneck, another classic way to do things. And the women are wearing plain dresses like they should be, representing a church. After all, what are they supposed to wear? Mini skirts and boots? So they're portraying themselves as these religious people wearing the Star of David, and what was even stated, if I remembered correctly, is there they are with their robes on and wearing their pentagrams. Well, who believes that? Are you that dumb that you go and look at this picture and you don't say, well, first of all, I don't see no robes. And if you're going to state something as a pentagram, maybe you should know what a pentagram looks like. And it's quite obvious that these people are wearing the Star of David. And that's when they were into the Jehovah thing. They moved into suits and ties so they could get away from all that stuff. So, but it was portrayed like they went in there with robes on and everything else, and that they were welcomed by Wallace. Now, somebody pulled this off. It's very interesting, but the only reason it was pulled off is because they had, and I'm assuming that Wallace didn't want to be looked at as anti-Christian or even anti-Jewish at that time, so he was allowed to talk to them. So understand that. Don't believe anybody. Get the facts for yourself and see what's out there. So there's really no source of Gnosis out there except myself. And, I can only tell you what appears to be correct now. So things in the future may be a little bit different, but my track record and the information that I get is from third parties. It doesn't come from me. I piece the pieces together. This is the best information we have from now, and I try not to fall into any traps. I don't have a real axe to grind. I want to get the truth out there and find out what's going on. If we're going to discover the real people behind this and the connections to all the satanic cults that are operating today, well, we're going to have to get the proper information. But if you're stating all this misinformation, I have to wonder, whose side are you on? Are these people in any way, and I'm not singling out anybody, are they being influenced directly by other groups? Are they being fed information, disinformation, because they know they're going to repeat it? Or all these people actually bought off? Are they really threatened or bought off? I have no idea. And as I said, I'm not picking any one person to do that. I have no idea. And any statements I make are alleged statements. I don't know. I know the statements that are on tape that which I've mentioned here, and every one of these are on tape and mentioned. So you can follow this all up of people making these statements. And here's the picture. And that's why I like to put up the proof of it all. So I don't know what the real story behind it is, but a lot of it I think comes down to sensationalism. What they are doing is trying to make sensationalized stories to get people to actually follow them. And they're glorifying a church on top of it because it's not doing anything negative against the church. There's more interest in the church today than there ever was, the process church, which really doesn't even exist. People are trying to restart things, but I'm not sure what's going on there. I haven't looked into it much. But all of this is part and parcel of what is going on. But this is not this instance. This is every single thing that you're told, everything that you learn is fraud. It's lies. It's disinformation. You're living in an urban legend, just like World War II. 75% of the casualties of the Germans in World War II was done by the Russians. So who won that war? Well, whoever kills the most people wins the war, hands down. That's the Russians. So, well, you think the other things and all that stuff there. And 90% of Europe was on the Nazi side. So you don't know that either because you weren't taught that. It was the big struggle and all those great Scandinavians and all these, you were all helping. No, they weren't. They were all on the side of the Nazis. So, it's about time we just know this. We know where these people are coming from so we don't make mistakes again. We're doing the same thing with the Ukraine and everything out right now that the stupid United States wants to go in there and put troops. That's Europe's problem. Maybe they shouldn't be in the pocket of the Russians and buying trillions of dollars worth of natural gas from the Russians that Europe does to support them. Maybe they wouldn't have the money for that big military. So these are what you have to understand. Get the facts, people. It's out there. Nothing is really hidden. It's just that what they give you is the glossy cartoon version of everything because they know you're never going to look at anything. You're not going to read anything. People don't read anything. Your government doesn't read the bills they pass. They skim through them. Anybody who's in Congress will tell you, or in government, they don't read all this stuff. They have other people read it to give their opinion, or if they do read it, they skim it. They have hundreds of pages, thousands of pages a day to read. It just doesn't get read. This is the game that goes on. So nobody really knows what's going on because they're trying to go through things expediently and just getting, it's basically about something. So all that, but that leads into really serious problems. So hopefully everybody gets it now. Everybody understands what's going on, and they fully understand this entire area of the urban legend you're living in, the disinformation you're getting, whether it's direct or indirect. Are people threatened? Are they bought off? We just don't know to what level. Are they just doing it to make money and filling their pockets like Maury Terry was doing? He was creating an entire story so that he could get more and more money. That's what was going on. There was nothing there. There's nothing to the Son of Sam. Everything's been said. And if you think you're going to go against murderous satanic groups, well, I think you're pretty naive. And they don't want to find that out. They want to find out something that happened 30 years ago and that person's now dead. Yeah, he was this terrible. Yeah, they don't want to face the fact that these kind of groups are operating today at a large level. And so many people disappear, so much going on. It's quite frightening. But nobody wants to deal with the real. They want to deal with this comic book fantasy that's going on. And they only want to find out so much. And when you give them something different, they don't want to hear it. So it's as simple as that. And this includes, it's not the average person. This includes all these so-called reporters, these investigators, that don't seem to want to get any information from anybody. And if you criticize them, they don't want to talk with you at all. Instead of saying, hey, what's your problem? What do you got? So that wouldn't you do that if you're an investigator? I listen to everybody. And I take their information in of what they've got to say. Now, whether I believe it, whether I follow up with it, well, that's another thing. I know people who are just telling the company line and who wants to talk with them or anything else. But, I'm more than happy to communicate with anybody who has potent information. I've never found that out. And people who don't want to talk, well, what's wrong with you? How come you don't want to communicate and find out if this really is a good source? Why don't you want to be corrected on massive idiot errors that make you look like a fool? Well, you really have to wonder here, and this is all society, and you'll get a teacher that preaches the same garbage year after year because that's what he's been told to do, or the book he's working on. He's not trying to find facts. He's repeating nonsense. And I find this all the time. So nobody cares, and you have to wonder to the point, well, it's so bad, And there's so much disinformation. Everybody's living in this urban legend that what is there a bigger picture? Obviously, people are controlling things and so forth, but a lot comes down to the individuals. These individuals who refuse to talk to people that have potent, real information, facts to give them, well, obviously, they aren't seeking the truth. So what is their agenda? That's the big question. And you can't trust anything that they tell you on any subject matter, because you find one area where it's so bad and people have tried to correct them on that and they refuse to talk with you. Well, what is really going on? Very, very suspicious. Until next time.